Oh, you best better believe we're going to be getting in there with all of the possibilities for the 2026 NHL Draft. And here's the thing about that. You see, in today's video, we're going to be responding to Craig Button's mock draft as posted on TSN. And you know, it would have been easy for me to sit here and make a video where we actually just go through the top picks. He has 1 through 16 on his TSN thing, and we could have done a top 10 NHL mock draft. That sounds like a great video idea, right? But instead of doing that, I honestly don't care about picks number 6, pick 11, pick 14. Like, I'm not really too interested in seeing what happens with the Blues or the Devils or the Blue Jackets or any of these other teams. What I am interested in, though, is the top of the draft. Because, of course, my Vancouver Canucks are there. They're 3rd overall this year. And because Craig Button's 2026 mock draft has some very interesting takes on which guys will go to which teams at the very top of the draft. So without further ado, here's a tweet from NHL Watcher, posted after the draft lottery took place yesterday. Craig Button's 2026 top 16 NHL mock draft. We're only looking at the top 5 here. At 1st overall, the Toronto Maple Leafs take Gavin McKenna. Not surprising. At 2nd overall, the San Jose Sharks take Chase Reid. Interesting. At 3rd overall, the Vancouver Canucks take Caleb Malhotra. And then at 4th overall, the Chicago Blackhawks take Ivar Stenberg. Keaton Verhoff goes 5th to the New York Rangers, and then the rest of the mock draft follows suit. This is an interesting list of guys and an interesting order, and it's one that I think a lot of Canucks fans and NHL draft fans have slowly opened within themselves as a possibility for the actual draft order in 2026. Is Gavin McKenna going number 1? Yeah, I think he is. I think that's pretty much a slam dunk. But the draft opens up at number 2. Because Chase Reid is a guy that could very well be this year's Simon Nemec. A guy who goes 2nd, not because he's the 2nd best talent, but because the team that's drafting him just doesn't really need a center. Or a winger. Yes, the top center of the draft is Caleb Malhotra. The top wingers are Stenberg and McKenna. But San Jose, they kind of don't need any more of those. I understand that you can say, oh, BPA, best player available, whenever you get that opportunity. But in practice, we've seen teams not afraid to take a positional player rather than the best player available. It happens, I'd say, maybe every other year or so to a significant capacity. I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Simon Nemec and his 2nd overall selection back in 2022, despite the fact that everybody thought that Cooley and Wright were going to be 1 and 2, not Slavkovsky and Nemec. In 2018, we saw the exact same thing. You had Quinn Hughes and Brady Tkachuk on the board. Guess what? Montreal took Jesperi Kotkaniemi 3rd overall. And it was made even worse when Arizona took Barrett Hayton 5th overall over Philip Zadina and Quinn Hughes. That was another scenario where the winger went lower simply because he's a winger. I'd say in 2020, there was a conversation about this as well because Tim Stützle went over Lucas Raymond. Now, that's not that big of a discrepancy when you compare the players, especially based off of what they've become nowadays, but still, conversations have arisen over the past few years of teams prioritizing their need over the BPA consensus, despite the fact that their need isn't necessarily the BPA consensus. And San Jose, the luxury that they have with Igor Chernyshov, with Macklin Celebrini, with Michael Misa, with William Eklund, with Will Smith, they have a whole bunch of really talented young dudes up front, and not that many defensemen. So Chase Reid, as the top defenseman of this draft, and a guy that was ranked as high as number 1 by some certain scouts on The Athletic, the idea of Chase Reid going 2nd overall to San Jose is not a bad take, and it's one that I think has a lot more realism than anybody else would have expected heading into May or even last month in April. I get that there was a little bit of conversation about Chase Reid potentially going higher because of the fact that some mock drafts had Reid at number 1, but hey, the fact that he could go 2, that's also possible here, especially since it is San Jose. Vancouver taking Caleb Malhotra at number 3 in Craig's mock draft is also interesting because Button had an entire thing on, I think it was Sakaris and Price, where he essentially said that teams are not built on the wings. Teams are not built up the boards, essentially. They're built down the middle. You need to have guys who can drive the play in the middle of the ice and control pace, dictating the flow of the game. And Caleb Malhotra, Craig Button even said on Sakaris and Price that Caleb Malhotra is arguably as good as Ivar Stenberg. So even though you can debate that Stenberg was supposed to be that top guy for most of the year, Stenberg doesn't help you build your team the right way. Caleb Malhotra is every bit as good as Stenberg is. This is what Rick Dollywell said after the draft lottery took place as well. He wouldn't be surprised if the Canucks took a serious look at Caleb Malhotra with the 3rd overall pick. He wasn't that high earlier in the season, but he had a great second half in the OHL, a big, strong center who fills a positional need in the organization. Now, too much of anything is a bad thing, but too many centers isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, the Vancouver Canucks had their own center issues in the past with Horvat, Pettersson, and Miller, add on Elias Lindholm after Horvat left, but nowadays it's like, already, best case scenario for the guys that are on the team right now is that you see Elias Pettersson stabilize as a top 6 center, maybe Marco Rossi becomes a top-line guy, and then you have Braden Coots also in the system chilling and progressing potentially as a future top 6 too. Do you really need another center if your focus is the long term? Now, I understand that not everybody is going to pan out, and who's to say Elias Pettersson is even going to be able to get back to form or get back to any sort of top 6 serviceable nature of his. But I do worry, at the very least, that maybe Caleb Malhotra could come in here and block off the potential development of some other guys the Canucks have in their system already. That's assuming that Pettersson and Rossi are here for the long haul. If it's just Coots and Malhotra, then it's like, okay, I can understand what the philosophy is there. But you can never have too many wingers at the same time, right? So if Stenberg is available, I have a very difficult time thinking the Vancouver Canucks would pass on him. At least, maybe that would be a much more realistic take if Patrick Allvin was still in the mix. We all know that he's not in the Canucks organization anymore, or at least as of right now. If he was still a part of the team, then maybe there would have been a much higher chance Stenberg goes 3rd overall, if he was available, of course. But Craig's mock draft has Stenberg going 4th overall to the Chicago Blackhawks, which in its own right would just be so ridiculous. I mean, this would reek of the Edmonton Oilers 2016 draft selection of Jesse Puljujärvi at 4th overall, when the Oilers, after pissing everybody off because they got Taylor Hall, Nugent Hopkins, Nail Yakupov, and Connor McDavid, the year after McDavid they're picking 4th, and it's like, okay, at least they're not getting one of these top 3 bona fide elite studs in Matthews, Laine, or Puljujärvi, right? And then guess what? Columbus takes Dubois 3rd overall, Puljujärvi falls to the Oilers, and everybody's pissed off again because they ended up getting this guy who led the World Juniors in scoring, I'm pretty sure, as a draft-eligible player. That's kind of the moment that this situation reminds me of. Ivar Stenberg, so good at the World Juniors, looking better than Gavin McKenna was, and inevitably he just goes 4th overall to Chicago to hang out with Connor Bedard and become the next best thing in the Windy City. Stenberg and Bedard seems like a realistic possibility if both San Jose and Vancouver go off the board and just take Reid and Malhotra. Maybe it's not off the board per se in the most off the board kind of way, but it is worth talking about at the very least. So with that said, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Craig Button's 2026 NHL Mock Draft? There's an entire list here, but I really just wanted to focus on the top 4, McKenna, Reid, Malhotra, and Stenberg. Thoughts in the comments about this order, what things would look like if this was how it went down. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.